Hello, this is Gary Marr from Wayland Community College. This screencast is for my CIS133DA students, spring 2018 online. In the screencast, I want to talk about Unit E. I'm going to talk about it using PowerPoints like I've done in the past, and also by some of the examples that are covered in the textbook. If you have a hard time seeing any of this in the Canvas YouTube video, I would suggest downloading the PowerPoints in the sample files and have them loaded on the PC so you can kind of bounce back and forth, pausing the video to look at things maybe a little bit larger, easier to see. Now, this particular chapter starts off, for me anyways, a little bit on the confusing side, because I think that what they're trying to get across to everyone here is that fonts and text can be a problem. And that's going to kind of run counter to maybe what you found in the first 4 units, where the text was fairly easy to specify and manipulate. What they're trying to point out here is that based on where you actually run this page from, the browser and the platform, the font that you originally selected for the page may not be available on that other browser or machine. And so therefore that's something to think about. So you want to be careful that you always specify the font families. Now, I will tell you that for a lot of web developers, you'll be working on your machine with your browser, running these files locally, so that you probably won't have a problem with fonts. Everything will be visible, it'll be seen clearly, it'll be exactly the way you want it to be. The problem is that you're not running it on some of the other browsers or maybe some other platform. And this needs to be tested. Products like Notepad and WebStorm and a few other will let you take and look at your page in different browsers. That would be helpful. Uploading the page to the internet, which we're going to talk about here, either if not this week, next week, might be helpful. GCC does have an internet server that you can load your web pages from. In this way, you can try the page from multiple environments, multiple browsers. But I will tell you that a lot of this is also maybe not necessary to get through Chapter E. Typically, if you follow the instructions that are in the textbook and in the assignment, you should be fine. What they're trying to make you aware of is that there could be a potential problem that you don't know about without at least understanding the concept of fonts and text size and colors, okay? But something that probably won't hit you in the assignment or with the reading the textbook. Now, I understand that that's kind of confusing, but that's the backdrop of what's happening here in Unit E. So we've got something called a font stack. You've got something called generic font families. You've got a thing called font families. And essentially what this is it's going to be a statement in CSS which identifies several different fonts. And the first font's the primary font. If it's not found, it falls in the secondary font. When it comes to generic font families, what it does there is it says you can specify a family of fonts, whether it be serif or non or sans serif. And these are different styles of fonts. And again, I think probably the best thing to do here is as you get into the textbook, go into the sample files and make some changes. See what these things look like. Also, look at the video that or go back to the video that I covered in week 2 or module 2 for W3 schools. Quite often, that's a nice place to try some of this stuff out. So let me go forward a little bit here. The other thing this book also talks to is downloadable fonts. And essentially what's happening here is instead of relying on the fonts that are installed in the machine, in the browser that you're going to render the page with, you can also download fonts from a trusted source like Google. And that way, typically, if someone's looking at your page on the internet, they obviously have internet connectivity. And instead of getting the fonts from the browser or the PC, they would use the internet to go to a Google site, and that's the one they use in this particular class or book. And it would pull down the fonts from Google so that you know those fonts would be there. All right. A couple of tables that are useful are this one called font stacks, then one called font families. These will give you an idea of some of the fonts that go with kind of, I guess, generic nickname type classifications you can put in CSS. Now, having said that, again, like we've talked about in previous chapters, the best way to learn this material is to go into the actual CSS file and make changes, see what it looks like. You can see here we have a font family. Box shadow background color is talked about in this chapter. Here's another font family statement, etc. All of these things are identified in the textbook, and it actually does a lot better than the PowerPoints because the PowerPoints typically cover the topic. The textbook on the right-hand side of the book will show you the actual statements, where they would appear if HTML is involved. It'll show you that. It'll also typically show you a page rendering of what this page now looks like because of the content talked about in Unit E. Again, one of the nice things about Notepad++ is I can load my CSS and HTML file inside it. It gives me the syntax coloring, which for at least the HTML file means that the blue is comments, the green is tags, the white is string literals, the attributes are, orange. What I've done in this particular case, we've talked about this before, the modernizer.custom.407 blah 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 is a little JavaScript program that helps take away problems with your page that'll sometimes crop up if you're using Internet Explorer. It's not really necessary, so what I did is I commented it out. Rather than delete it, I commented it out, and that's fine. Here's the downloadable font that I just talked about, and that family is called Bitter. Bitter is one of the ones that is over here. I just saw it in my page. Let's see if I can find it right there. So basically, this particular example is going to use a downloaded font called Bitter. And that's a family of fonts, I believe, if not a font. I'm not sure which one is off the top of my head, but that's on that Google connection that you can make for downloadable fonts. Again, the best way to learn this material is to not try to memorize it, but understand that each one of these has an impact of something on the page and make changes. Change it from Tacoma to Times, or use a different font family, from sans serif to one of the other generic font families. This is the best way to learn this stuff. You're going to find that in the assignments, it's going to probably let you walk through and add the different statements. It'll all render nice and pretty. But if you really want to kind of kick the tires on it, go in and make some changes and see cause and effect. Do not try to render the CSS page, but in HTML with Notepad++, one of the advantages is it does support 3 browsers right here. Okay. There may be some configuration on Firefox and IE. It's been a while since I've used it, but Chrome, I know it finds it automatically. And as soon as you click on the Chrome link, it will render the page. Now, the best way to approach this now would maybe be go back to the Notepad++, make a change in the CSS, and see what happens to this. Okay, you should see a difference, whether it's a font size, a color, or whatever. That's all cause and effect, and that's one of the best ways to learn this material. All right, let's get back into the PowerPoints. Font families typically are how you're going to specify fonts through CSS. It's a special declaration that you will give a series of font names in any generic fonts that you want, or generic font families you want to have available. If these fonts are not available first, it'll go to Tacoma, to Arial, to Helvetica, to sans serif. This is a discussion of that Bitter font that came from Google. And let's see, it starts back here. I'm a page ahead of myself here. They are available. The nice thing about custom fonts, if they come from a source like Google, then you can pretty much know that if a person is going to be viewing your page on the internet, they must have internet connection. So therefore, they should have availability to this custom font. It is possible to pick a font that you may have available on your machine because of something else you install that no one else has, in which case then you're going to have all kinds of issues. And that's what one of those initial concepts they're trying to drive home on the beginning of Unit E. We've got font size, line height, again, settings that you can change to make that page look a little bit different. Obviously, having About Us highlighted larger in the middle of the page is going to make it stand out the way we want. There's also some formatting in the footer there. All of this stuff can be found, all of these statements can be found inside of the examples, and you should try to run through those, look at them, make sure you understand what's going on in the CSS. If not, either go back and read that part of the book again or give me an email, let me explain, help you with it. Bold and italics, obviously this is something you're going to want to use. Font weight, font style, very popular. The book will give you examples. There's also some here. The book's a little easier to read than the PowerPoints, but they're in the book also. This particular chapter has a lot of different slides in it because there's a lot of variability with processing text. You also have pseudo elements, which are general descriptions, first line, last line, those kinds of things. There's the table that goes with that. Let's go a little farther here. Coloring. You can set the text with just constant names, which is what we've used so far, or you can also use hex values or red, blue, green values, which gives you a lot more variability in terms of what color you want to have displayed. If there's a specific color that you want to have as part of a logo, then you want to try to match it up with a hex value RGB color value. Typically, if it's a strange shade of a particular color, you'll go online. There's a couple different tools you can use that will help you look up hex and RGB colors. You'll find those numbers and then plug them in the appropriate background or foreground color statement in CSS. This is again something I'd play around with. You know, go out there, do a search in hex and RGB for CSS. Go into the W3 school site, see what they have to offer there too, and that will help you better understand that. Shadowing, same thing. You can add shadows to the text. There's a whole bunch of settings here that you can manipulate to get that shadow effect. Here's one around the box. Here's one around the text. Media queries have a lot to do with how something looks if it's printed. If you have a web page that has a black background with a lot of light text colors in the foreground, that printed is not going to look very good. Whereas if you make a change in the media query, if you add that section to your CSS, you're going to get a much more visually pleasing view when printed out. In this case, black text on a white background. This is something, if you know that page is going to be a form, it might need to be printed out by the person who's using the site, then you want to add the media query to your CSS. That is the end of the slides. There are a lot of them in this chapter, but again, I think that you're not going to have too much of a problem with the assignment. I think that it's fairly straightforward. I think what this really focuses on, or what makes this chapter a little confusing, is the fact that they are saying that, you know, maybe when you finish your page, you want to test it across different browsers just to make sure it looks exactly the way you expect it. If not, you may have to add some additional fonts, or you may have to access a font online. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Send me an email or send me a text in Canvas. Thank you.